Hype Show.
Every Thursday, fortnightly.
For news, views, reviews, and more.
Join host Barry Kelso and guests from 6:30 p.m. Thursdays, fortnightly.
Don't Believe the Hype Show. Don't believe the hype.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Don't Believe the Hype Show. I'm Valerie Kelso, and as you can see, we've got another amazing guest on our show. But before I get into the show, I just want to tell you a little bit about the Purple Light Touch Foundation. Everything that is made through this show goes towards helping a woman or a young girl recovering from domestic violence, abuse, sex trafficking, any life-altering situation, even cancer. So if anybody would like to sponsor the show, come on to our show, feel free to reach out on 817-350-0444. And without further ado, we are going to get into our show because we have got another special, wonderful, beautiful woman of God who is going to tell you a little bit about herself. And her name is Miss Lavinia. Miss Lavinia, you can take it away and tell the people a little bit about you.
Thank you, Val. First, thank you for having me on Don't Believe the Hype Show. I am honored to be here today. It's a blessing to be here as any day. But I am Lavinia Masters. I am an advocate. I am a survivor of sexual violence. I am also a coach. I'm an author. I'm a public speaker. And so much more. But most importantly, I am a child of God, and I believe that my assignment is to come and help other survivors of sexual violence and relationship violence to find their pathway to healing. And I'm glad to be here today.
Thank you very much, because many times, many of us have gone through forms of abuse, but don't even realize it is abuse.
Yes.
So, Miss Lavinia, because this is a very, very deep subject.
Yes.
And so you might find some things that might trigger you today. And if you do feel triggered, please feel free to reach out to Miss Lavinia Master. She's going to share her contact details further down in the show. You can also reach the Purple Light Touch Foundation for anybody that might get triggered or might need help going forward after facing sexual abuse. So your abuse invaded the home.
Yes.
How did that become? How was your abuse invaded in your home?
Well, my abuse invaded my home. First of all, I was a survivor of childhood sexual abuse when I was a little girl, and I didn't have many memories of that. I remember the abuse, but I don't remember who the abuser was.
Okay.
So I guess I was so young, I kind of dismissed it, but I had my fears of being abused. I had my fears of people and individuals and how I was treated or what have you. But I think the main abuse that triggered me or caused such a traumatic blow in my life was when I was 13 years old and someone broke into our home and raped me violently at knife point. And I didn't know who this person was. I didn't know why this person chose me or even how he had entered the home at the present time. I later learned that he came through a downstairs window because I was downstairs on the couch sleeping with my siblings, sleeping on the floor, and the adults were upstairs sleeping. It was very scary because, like I said, I had endured childhood sexual abuse. I didn't remember all the details of whom my perpetrator was or if there were multiple perpetrators, but to have someone to come in to my home uninvited and not knowing anything and being so brutal and violent with me was very scary because I don't remember the violence parts from the childhood sexual abuse. And so this person came in through the front window and they left out of the back door. And after they raped me, it was total devastation. My mind was totally discombobulated. I was totally confused. I was bloodied and bruised. My clothes was torn from me. I had never been penetrated in that manner. And it was just very scary to endure that and not knowing who this person was to come into your home. We later called the police after I ran upstairs screaming for my mom. The police came out, took me to Park Memorial Hospital. That was another horrific experience. Enduring the police alone was a terrible experience as a child because of how they questioned me as if it was something that I had did wrong or blamed me for my for the rape at that present time. And so just that night stuck in my head. And still today, I remember it like it was yesterday. And I was 13 at the time, but that was a very horrific experience. And like I said, to not know who the individual was that decided to come in and violate your child was devastating to me and something that I would never forget.
So you have been you was abused at 13.
Yes.
Do you remember like when before 13 you was abused, or did it, or is it something that doesn't matter now because the at the age of 13 that one took precedence over what happened to you?
At the present time, when I was 13 years old, I didn't really remember the childhood abuse. I don't know if I had dismissed it or I had started growing out of it. I didn't even understand that concept. But when I was raped at 13, that did, it took precedence over everything. It's like it threw me back into all of my trauma. But it was like a major factor, it was a major trauma in my life that I had to deal with because I don't know how I dealt with the childhood sexual abuse. But what I later learned was that as I began to go through my healing processes after the rape, that God allowed me to remember the childhood sexual abuse later on in life. And it's like I now had to deal with it because I didn't realize how I hadn't went through a healing process because maybe I was so young. And this is, I think, what happens with so many children when they do forget about the abuse. It starts showing up in their lives later on, and they don't even understand why they're doing certain things or certain behaviors or certain actions they may take or different things of that nature. And so I believe the way it all happened to me, it may sound crazy to some, but when you're spiritual, you realize that some things are necessary because I absolutely had to go through my healing processes. And I believe it would have been worse for me as an individual had I not dealt with the childhood sexual abuse that came after the sexual assault, even though that rape was heinous and unknown and uncalled for. But I still believe that it all played its part in my healing processes.
So when you was after you was raped or while you was being raped, you said there was other siblings in that same room.
Yes.
And no one didn't wake up.
No.
You
No
know, I mean,
one.
that's sort of weird that none of them
Yeah.
didn't even
Yeah.
hear what was
Yeah.
going on
Going
while
on.
you was being raped.
It was kind of scary for me as well because I thought maybe when the rapist was talking to me, he told me he as he thrust the knife deep in my throat, he told me to shut up from crying or trying to scream, or he would kill one of the children on the floor, which made me aware that he knew they were there. But in my mind, I wondered if they were still alive. Had he already killed them? I had so many things that was going on in my head. Was my family even alive upstairs? Had he already made his traction upstairs and then came back down to assault me? I mean, there was just so many things that I just tried to fathom in that moment and trying to keep my sanity at the same time. But it was very scary. I even thought, were there more people in the house? Was he not the only person in there and holding my family hostage? I mean, it was chaotic that night to endure that. But I was very worried and concerned about my siblings because I was the oldest and I was always taught to take care of them and protect them. And in this moment, I felt I couldn't protect them. I couldn't do anything. I was being held at hostage myself. And what was I supposed to do? And that was tormenting itself, alone to know that I'm laying there being violated and not knowing or understanding, if my siblings were safe from harm.
So after you've gone through your trauma,
Yeah.
how do your siblings it affect them later on? Are they still, do they talk about what happened to you, or do you talk about it as a family, or
Well,
not?
that's weird that you asked that because I know vicarious trauma is devastating. And my siblings never really talked about it. I remember my little brother said he remembers that night, and my little sister, it's like they just don't talk about it. They just don't talk about it. And I don't know if that's because the family as a whole And I know you've heard this the whole thing how African Americans we don't talk
Yeah.
about abuse in our homes, what happens in the home, stay in the home. And so I didn't, and I was told that basically my mother, my late mother at the time, I don't know if she was, I don't know if it's their way of trying to protect us or hoping that it would just go away, like the childhood sexual abuse. You just tuck it away in your mind or what have you, but we just didn't have those conversations. They know what happened. They were there. I know they were there. I remember them giving their 2 cents about it, but after that, nothing else was said until fast forward over 20 years later when I went to reopen my case because I had heard nothing else about it. And my family kind of went into shock, honestly, that I did that. They were like, why is she doing that? Why is she bringing that back up? Why is she opening that? And I never questioned them as to why they were concerned. Because at that point it's not about you, it's about me at this moment, my healing and me moving forward, because I lived that night, that trauma, and I understand they lived the trauma, but I had to focus on me before I could focus on anyone else and how they dealt with that trauma. But I do pray that, and I still pray that they've dealt with that trauma, that vicarious trauma, that secondary trauma of seeing me go through that sexual assault.
So for 20 years, you basically, did you just sweep it under the carpet and not think about what had taken place with you? Or did you think about it continuously but kept your mouth closed rather than keep ashing it up with the family? Because sometimes family, oh, shut up, I don't want to hear this anymore. You know what I'm saying? So what was the process? What made you decide that you wanted to relive what you went through?
My process was, in the beginning, it was horrific because my family didn't talk about it. The police basically asked me 3 questions. They asked me, was I sure it wasn't my boyfriend? Am I sure I didn't let him in the window? And am I sure I wasn't having sex and didn't want my mom to find out about it? I later understood that they planted a seed of doubt into my family's head. And I grew angry about that because it's like you didn't believe me. And as I got older, I realized you not believing me mean that you didn't do anything about my case. And so I went through a lot of psychological, emotional, mental changes. I went from angry to bitter to violent myself to just an uncontrollable teenager growing up in my youth. My family didn't discuss it with me. Everything was basically my fault. There were moments I assumed that my mom even blamed me because she asked me, she said, are you sure something happened that night? Because, of course, the police never came back to even review or question or open my case. And so it was very hard for me trying to deal with that and deal with that trauma. And I met my husband when I was 18 years old. I'm still married today, 35 years later. But when I met him, it was something different about him. It was tumultuous at first because I didn't realize that I had so much trauma and so much baggage that I was bringing into a relationship. But I would honestly say about 5 years in, and after having our son, I realized that I had to make a change in my life, or I would just flatline and keep running into brick walls and self sabotaging and destroying my own self and not understanding my self worth and not understanding that I deserved a good marriage, I deserved a healthy relationship, I deserved to be whole and healed. Because a lot of times we don't even realize that we need healing. We just go through life. We put on, as the people say, our big girl underwear, and we just go, and that's not healthy. That's not healthy at all.
Like even with those bigger
Yes.
underwear, you can tuck all
Yes,
trauma
yes,
inside
yes,
those underwears, and
exactly,
we don't even realize it. You took
exactly,
in a lot of things in. You know what I mean?
exactly.
So how did it affect your mental health?
Oh my God.
Because like this is mental health month, and
Month, yes.
so I just wanted to know, how did it affect your mental health?
Um, it almost destroyed my mental health. When I tell you, I was paranoid. I was always anxious, always stressed out about stuff, always worried about death. Uh, I always thought something bad was going to happen to me. I never looked for anything good to happen. I never looked for anything great to come from me. I felt I would never be able to produce anything. It was just negativity that I always expected in my life. And I knew that that was my destiny. And I had to learn by my faith, as my husband told me to turn to my first love, which was my faith in God, that I deserve so much more. And I had to make that turn. I had to change my whole entire mindset that I deserve so much more and that this was not my destiny and that God was in control of my destiny and he's given me power to control it. And so in the beginning, my mentor I was not the best person to be around. I was not pleasant. I would be ready to cuss you out in a heartbeat. I didn't like people. I would literally say that I don't like people because I thought people had their own hidden agendas. You didn't really know who people really were. Everybody wore a mask. They came in disguise. Imposter syndrome. Say one thing to you, do something else. Live a life in the forefront, but in the darkness, they're this totally different, heinous person, and so that just caused a lot of mental chaos for me. But I'm grateful that I was able to change my mindset and to first look within inside of me and change who I was and how I looked at things and how I viewed my life and to accept what God allow. And sometimes that's accepting that I can't change people. I can only change me. And once people are revealed to me or who they really are, I just deal with it the best way I can or don't deal with it at all. But it really taught me how to release a lot of toxic behaviors from me because I had accepted a lot of toxic in my life. And that's normal for those people who've been abused. It's just toxic. You
So,
accept it. Yeah.
so you got married at the age of 18.
Yes.
And most people will say, well, if you was abused, you wouldn't have got married,
Yes.
right? Because
Yes.
why would you want another man to touch you after you've been
Yes.
abused?
Yes.
What was your experience after you was abused, going to a relationship with your husband? Because I'm sure that he must have had
Oh
to
my
put up a
God.
fight.
Yes, he
To,
did.
to,
Yes. It was very difficult. I am not going to lie. It was very difficult. Um, and it's amazing to me, even today, that I have a healthy relationship and a healthy marriage with my husband. But I can honestly say it makes a difference when you are blessed to have someone in your life that understands or even try to remotely understand what you've been through. And that's why it's so important that I tell survivors of abuse that you articulate or have these conversations with someone that you're going to be involved with, because if not, they won't understand it. And I'm grateful to God that I had that wisdom, and it had to be God to have these conversations, even though I was afraid and I was fearful and I didn't really trust anyone. My husband gave me a level of trust to this day that I still don't understand how he did that. I'm like, I don't know. You had to be sent by God, but he was just a perfect gentleman. And I'm like, they still exist, and I believe that was part of my saving grace, and God allowed him to come in and to allow me to trust and put my guards down slowly, very slowly. And like I said, the first 5 years, it was very hard, very hard. And I would tell him, certain things you can't say to me. It's triggering. I don't want to participate in this. I don't want to do this. Is this all you men think about is sex? And it was very, I mean, it was hard. It was very hard. And but he endured and he was patient with me, and that meant a lot to me. That meant the world to me. But even to this day, and not to try to put my business out there, to this day, there are still some things I struggle with, because how my abuser was so violent with me and didn't make the whole act of enjoying sex enjoyable. And so it's like, you got to treat me like a baby. I have to be treated gentle, calm, no rough talking, no. I mean, that's just me. And so he's accepted that, and I'm grateful that he has. But it's like it took a toll on me, and sometimes it's like I just can't. I can't do it. And and I believe all survivors or victims go through that.
Because it's like, for me, like I went through domestic violence. That
Yes.
was my poison.
Yes.
And I also went through verbal abuse.
Yes.
But it wasn't until recently when I was working on a client,
Yes.
that's when I was triggered by something that happened to me when I was 16. And I
Yes.
never even thought anything about it. That,
Yes.
you know what? This is abuse.
Yes.
I was abused at 16. And the lady was on my table and she kept saying, I'm getting a pain. I'm getting this pain. And every time I kept pressing on this pain, there was no pain there. And she kept saying, no, it's deeper, it's deeper, it's deeper. And I kept working on it. And I'm thinking, no. And then that, for some unknown reason, that triggered me back to when I was 16 back in England.
Yes.
And like you're saying about your parents not believing.
Yes.
You got to have parents that believe you when you tell them that something is wrong.
Right.
They've got to be able to say, let me go back and check because my child is not going to say this, right? But my problem was because I had a child, I was pregnant at 15.
Right.
I had my daughter at 16.
Right.
And then I had to go for physicals at my doctor's surgery. But while I was there, he was molesting me.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize that he was molesting me because you think of rape as rape, but you don't think of sexual assault as anything else, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So when my doctor was doing what he was doing to me, and I was telling my mom, I'm not pregnant, she didn't want to believe me because I already had a child. But when you've already had a baby, you know what it feels like to have a baby.
Yes, yeah.
Right? Any woman out there who's had a baby knows what it feels like to have a baby.
Right, right.
And my mom didn't want to believe me. I kept saying, Mommy, I'm not pregnant. The doctor kept telling my mom, yes, she's pregnant, and bring her back every single week. And every week he was putting his fingers up inside of me. And I'm there telling her, Mommy, I'm telling you I'm not pregnant. I've just had a baby. I know what a baby feels like.
Yeah.
And plus I wasn't even having sex at the time because my boyfriend at that time was elsewhere.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So he wasn't even around when my daughter was born.
Right.
And so fast forwards, he turned around and told my mom I'd lost this baby that he knew full well I wasn't pregnant with.
In the first place.
And then he told my mom, sign this piece of paper that if we find anything, we can cut her open.
Oh, wow.
And so that's what happened to me.
Wow.
So I ended up being cut for something that he tried to tell me that I had when I knew full well I didn't have it.
Yeah.
That's why I always tell people, know your body.
Yes.
This is yours. You're born with this body. Know if you feel a cut, if you feel something, know your body.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When I came out of surgery, I had a big cut in my stomach.
Wow.
Because for something that, and he says, oh, well, we thought we actually had a cyst. Wow. We need new full
to cover up what he's done, what he was doing. Yes.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I was so angry for years about what he did. But then I never looked at it until I actually met you.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. I never even thought that it was sexual abuse.
Yes. Yes. And you suppress it.
Right.
You do.
And
you
so
suppress
I'm
it.
61 next month. And I only realized this at the age of 60.
Yeah. It has no respect of time. It doesn't.
And I never even thought, you know what, I was molested.
Yes.
But yet I was drawn to a lot of women who had gone through trauma, and you don't even look at what you've gone through. Right. As sexual abuse.
Right.
You know what I mean? And even though I've met you and I was drawn to you, I never realized that today, this is the first time I'm literally talking about my trauma.
Right.
But luckily, I can deal with it. But before I came into this country, because this happened in England, it wasn't in this country, in case everybody's thinking, well, did it happen here? No, this was when I was back in England, because that's where I was born. And, you know what I mean? I did go and have another baby afterwards, but I lost that child and never got pregnant again.
Wow.
So at the age of 7.5 months, I lost my baby.
And
that was it. That was the last time I was ever pregnant. But I really have to thank God. He gave me my first daughter. Because who knows if right now I could be childless.
Yes. You
know what I mean? I could be, because if they had the way at the time, because I was underage, and in England it's not like over here. If you have a baby early, they want to take that child from you.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so when they found out I was pregnant, I was more or less one of the first black girls to have got pregnant, and they wanted
Wow.
to take my daughter. And I says, no, I made my mistake. I'm going to hold on to my child.
Yes, yes,
And that's what I
yes,
did. My
yes,
mom was angry. The church people told my mom you need to kick her out of the house and
yes,
blah blah blah. But luckily, I had such a wonderful dad,
yeah,
and he says, "You do not do nothing to my daughter." My dad
yes.
was when I tell you, my dad was a family man. He was such a family
That's
man,
awesome.
and because of him, my I couldn't walk to the doctors. I couldn't do nothing. He took me to
Yeah,
every hospital appointment.
yes,
He did everything that a
yeah,
father would do for his child.
yes, yes,
And that's what my dad did, you know what I'm saying?
yes,
But
yes.
if I didn't have him, who knows if my mom would have sent
Right,
me to somewhere to have this baby,
right, right,
because that's how, you
right,
know what I mean? You know, these
right.
older black women at the
Mhm.
time,
Oh, I
sometimes
know.
they're ignorant
They used to
to
do that. They used
to
to do that
things.
here. They would send a child off and
Hmm.
with the grandmother or somebody or aunt, and they'll come back. And sometimes they would say it's that other family member's baby when it actually was that young girl that had that baby, but they stripped her of her baby, or if
Yes.
they didn't give it up for adoption. So,
So that's what they
yeah,
wanted me to
yeah,
do. And I said, no,
yeah,
I'm not giving her up.
yeah,
And I kept my daughter.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And now I've got my daughter and my two beautiful granddaughters,
Yes, yes,
right? And
yes.
who knows what would have happened
Happened,
if I'd
yeah.
have turned around and got rid of her. Now I would have been motherless and
Yes,
childless.
yes, yes.
So
Because it's a traumatic experience.
it
It's like
is.
even after I was raped, violently raped, they told me I wouldn't be able to have children. And so we have one surviving son and we miscarried like 7 kids total. And that takes a toll on you because you tie it to that assault.
Mhm.
And in the beginning, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that till like 2011. This is way after I've gone through my healing phases and I'm fighting for others and doing for others. And it was like I realized the miscarriages and the trauma from that, and like you said, the pain in your body, it all ties in, and you don't realize
You
it's
don't.
like you said, you put those big girl panties on, but you putting more, you're just
You're
adding more
just
trauma
adding
to
more
it. You're
trauma
adding
to
to it,
it. That's
and that's
right.
what I was doing. I was adding that. I was bitter about losing my babies. I was still angry at God. I'm like, why did you allow me to lose my babies? But I wasn't tying it to the trauma of the
No,
sexual assault, the
that's
sexual
right.
abuse. So that is so true. I get it
You
completely.
know what I mean? So at what point, because I know that you've made a law and we're getting
Mm.
ready to close down this segment because we are going to bring you back next week
Okay.
because there's any viewer out there that would like to ask any questions. We are going to do a second part to this show because we need to know the real Lavinia Masters and what
Yes.
Lavinia Master really stands for,
Yes.
especially because as Afro-Caribbean women, do you find that we are treated a little bit different from everybody else?
Yes, ma'am, I do. I know for a fact we are treated differently, and it's unfortunate, but we've basically learned to deal with it. Like I said, we can't control a lot of things, but we've learned to deal with things, and those things we can change, or God has allowed us to change, or allow us to change. We fight for that change, and that's exactly what Lavinia Master does.
You know, I mean, one of the things I wanted to say to you as well is that as Black women,
Hmm.
we are told not to say nothing. What it
Yes,
goes on in the house stays in the
yes,
house. And it's a detriment to us. It's not just a detriment to us, it's also a detriment to our children
yes,
because that cycle gets repeated
yes, it
over and
does.
over and over.
Yes, it
And
does.
instead of there's a change, how can we make a change knowing that our parents are told to sweep it under the carpet, don't say nothing? Don't they understand that carpet is going to get bumps
Mm,
and all the toxins are going to have to come out one day, or you're going to trip up over that all the things that you swept under the carpet.
yes.
So, at what point did you see that you felt within yourself that you had to make a change?
I saw that, like I said, I want to say about 5 years into my marriage. I've been married 35 years this September. And like 5 years into my marriage, I saw that I had to make a change. My son is here. I'm noticing that this behavior is totally toxic that I have. It's causing issues within my marriage. My son is like totally confused, looking at me like, is my mom half crazy? Is my dad being mean to her? Do they love one another? Do they love me? You know, and as he's getting older, he's like, am I the problem? And I'm like, you know what? No, I have to look within myself. I have a lot of baggage and a lot of issues that I'm carrying, and I have to work on me. And working on me has taught me that I have to also articulate this to my child, my son, and my husband, and let them know, you know, these are issues that we cannot carry. These are problems that we cannot, you know, let continue in our family. I began to teach my son, because he was a toddler at the time, about touching and proper touching. And if he felt uncomfortable with people, and tell it, speak it. I don't care who it is. Mom and daddy will protect you. I don't care if it's grandma, grandpa. Let us know. We're gonna deal with it. You know, never be afraid to speak what happens, because this is what happens if you don't speak about it. It can destroy you internally, outside, you know, inside out. And I knew that change had to come. And so when I started with my family, I then realized I needed to work on it on an outward appearance as far as helping others, because I saw in my community, the African American community, that it was like a trend that was not a healthy trend, where we don't talk about this. And when I started talking, first you would have women be like, oh, like, I can't believe she's talking about rape, because they're not used to talking about it. And I'm like, okay, I got work to do. I have work to do. And that's when I began. I just went full force at starting to figure out how to get other survivors to come forward and talk about their sexual violence and the traumas of their past and dealing with it. My first experience publicly was my mom had me to speak at a program of hers. And at first I was nervous about talking about the rape. I said, I'll sing for you, Mama. And then I said, Mama, I'll do a poem for you. And then third time, my mom was like, no, you're going to talk about what God put on you to talk about. And I finally surrendered, and I said, okay, I'll talk about it. And when I talk about it, in that instant, it was 5 other speakers. And my mom had me the first speaker. Of course she did, because she was the host, and there was 5 other speakers after me. Each woman, some of them were pastors, told their stories who had never shared their stories publicly, and they did it because I stepped out on faith and I was obedient. And I talked about, I remember the scripture came out of Philippians, and everything give thanks. This is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. And so God was showing me, even in that trauma, you have to give thanks, because I delivered you from that and I brought you here. And so they were able to be witnesses to that and my testimony, and begin to share. And I saw that God had something greater for me to do with this, talking about sexual violence and relationship violence, and having people to begin to release. And so he showed me back then, and that was like in 2000, if you want to heal, you have to reveal.
That's right. And
Yes,
that's why
ma'am.
even me doing my massages,
Yes, ma'am.
I hear so many stories from different
Yes.
women.
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
like as soon as I touch them, they
Yes.
start wanting to reveal
Yes.
what they've gone through.
Yes, ma'am.
I've had a lady said to me, I can never forgive my dad.
Yes.
And I said to her, if you don't forgive your dad, how are you going to get into the kingdom of heaven if you
Yes.
saying you're a Christian?
Yes.
I says, how do you know your dad did not ask for forgiveness at the
Yes.
11th hour?
Yeah. Yeah.
And she turned around and says, I've never thought about it like that. And then I said, supposing when Stephen sees Saul in heaven, he's going to say, God, how did he get in here? This man just stole me.
Right.
This man did all these wrongs to me.
Right.
How did he get into heaven? I need to see that book because I want to know what changed him.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because the last thing Stephen saw of Saul was when he was being stoned.
Yes. Yes.
He's not going to know all the great things that Stephen has done. Paul has done
Yes.
later on in
Yes.
life.
Yes.
So it's all about forgiveness.
Yes.
Regardless of you saying you don't want to forgive, you've got to forgive. Because at the end of the day, I see all these women come on my table with cancer. I see them come on there with neck problems, back problems, foot problems. And when I'm talking to them and later on they're revealing, when I was a child, this happened to me, this trauma happened to me. So that's what the Purple Light Touch Foundation does, and the PLT Massage and Wellness. We deal with a lot of people, and even men, because we only touching on women, but I'm going to get a guy to come on and talk about the man side of things as well, because some men do get abused by women, and a lot of men in our society now have grown up as single parents, and they've had to deal with the baggage of women, and they don't even realize that their anger is not coming from them, it's coming by, like they say, monkey see what monkey do.
You speaking truth.
And
Because I can honestly say that in the beginning of my marriage, what I learned, because what I was told was that I was being abusive to my husband because of my anger. I didn't see that. At first, I was like, what? I was raped, and it's like I was entitled to that, and I was not. And I'm blessed that my husband stood that, but I had to ask him to forgive me because abuse is not always physical. It can be
That's
verbal,
right.
psychological, mental.
So we're going to bring you back for part
Yes,
two.
ma'am.
Right. So before we leave this segment, I want you to tell the viewers, what does "Don't Believe the Hype" mean to you?
Don't believe the hype means to me, don't believe the hype that everything is black and white. Don't believe always what you see. Try to look beyond the surface. Try to understand what people are going through, their backgrounds, their history. Uh, there's a reason why people do the things that they do. Not trying to justify it, but just don't believe everything that you see. Is not believing the hype.
Thank you. We are going to be back with Lavinia Masters because
Thank
we
you.
want to get into the Lavinia Masters law. So we will see you back next week for part two of the Lavinia Masters story. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.